Welcome everyone to Discourse. That's Retha.
And that's Tony.
And today we're talking about Tomorrow's End by G.R. Morris. Tomorrow's End by G.R. Morris is a science fiction book. I would call it like a hard science fiction book.
For sure.
Let me read the summary to catch all of you guys up. He never asked to be a hero, but the universe didn't give him a choice. Kevin Knight never wanted to be the one to save the galaxy, but when tragedy upends his life and demonic forces steal his soul, the fate of time and space are sealed, until a scaly, trench-coat-clad alien appears and gives him a glimpse into the true nature of all things. Astounded, Kevin learns the world he knows is merely an illusion created by alien beings who control humanity's every move. With an invasion imminent, he must defeat the blackness and perfect his powers before the bloody battle begins. Which prophecy will Kevin fulfill? The one of darkness or the one of light? Dang, this is like super dramatic, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is perfect for this book because, and it's crazy that it's following this kid because he's like the savior of humanity, defender of the galaxy, protector of the light, and his name is Kevin.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, did you know you would be saved by a person named Kevin?
Which is fantastic. I think a lot of people in this book have normal sounding names, which is fantastic because in a lot of hard science fiction books, you end up with a lot of really weird names. And I liked that the names were basic, and it made it easier for me to follow, which was especially beneficial in this book because it was very complex. You could tell the author spent a lot of time making sure all of these complex and different ideas mesh together because it follows this kid named Kevin, who is the savior of humanity, to keep it simple, and he's being trained by a guy named Robert, who is kind of like Morpheus in the Matrix.
That's exactly what I thought.
Yeah, to Kevin's Neo, right? And he's training him in all these different ways.
Yes.
And that's the majority of this story is Kevin, his backstory, who he is, how he's the savior, his training, and then how he uses that training to eventually defeat the big bad at the end. And in between all of that, we get a very in-depth perspective on, I guess, like Christianity's view on the savior role. He's kind of like Jesus, like he's saving people. They even say in the book that the Bible exists, number one, and secondly is like 80% true.
Right.
Right?
Like the very original Bible that was first written. That it's mostly true, that the stories are true. It's just everybody else interprets it throughout the years how they wanted.
And I like how Robert, because Kevin asked Robert all kinds of different questions. So Kevin is essentially the audience, right? We're following Kevin on this journey. And then Robert is answering all of these different questions, bringing the audience and Kevin up to speed. And Kevin asks him, like, so what about the Bible? Is it true? And Robert's like, majority of it, sure.
I think he was probably hinting more at, like, the main purpose of the Bible is what was true, not necessarily what everyone thinks it is.
Yeah. I think the more complex pieces come into the background information about why all of these things are happening. It was a lot of information about the beginning of humanity, basically, right?
Yeah, like
the beginning
Eden.
it was like a creation story as well. It was like if the Wachowski brothers made a Jesus movie.
Okay.
Or if the Wachowski brothers made like a savior movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was a mix between like the Matrix and
he even referenced like God, right? He's not really like a person. It's more like the way I imagine it was like these mists in the middle of like the galaxy, just being able to create things out of stuff that was floating around. Is essentially what he was saying.
It was a combination of a couple of different creation or Genesis stories from I think different religions, right? Like maybe the creation story from Christianity and maybe the creation story from Roman mythology as well, right? With the Titans creating things.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's kind of what I got from it as well.
Guess so.
So this book is a mix between like the Matrix and the Inception movie.
I know, that's
right. Like the Inception kind of mind trip.
Yes.
And then the Matrix kind of like training and world that he lives in.
But I was kind of hoping that they would just hook him up real quick and he would learn kung fu. I was like, okay, let's just get this wrapped up, you know.
Oh yeah, so there's this moment where Neo, right? He just wakes up and he's like, I know kung fu. But Kevin, I think, knows kung fu or it has
Right,
fighting
yeah.
ability from the start.
I mean, because his stepfather, was training him and things.
Yeah. So he's not completely helpless. He's just lacking information, which is great for us as the audience because we're going along this journey with him.
And a lot of it is more of like, more outside of your mind. Like you have to open your mind and you can literally do and create anything, any weapon, anything that you want to happen or have people see or whatever.
It's a very cerebral story.
Yeah.
Let me read this quote that kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about here.
Which I thought was super cool because I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, If we used our minds to our full capacity, I suppose that's the powers that we would have.
Yeah. And I like how this book gives the author's perspective on different kinds of philosophical ideas that people have. For example, this quote, this is Robert saying it. What does it mean to exist? Existence is not binary. It's a hierarchical progression that begins with a pre-metaphysical construct called order. Order was the seed that grew into the metaphysical spirit. That spirit moved up the hierarchy of existence when it merged with your physical body. Very high-level philosophical, metaphysical thinking, yes. Right? And you're keeping all these pieces together interspersed with some kinetic kind of action, right? Because we move from all of these explanations of existence and consciousness into some hard-hitting action where Kevin or Robert really is just kicking butt and taking names.
You mean while he was training him, or do you mean in the...
Yeah, in both training and then later on when they were putting that to use. The story has this ebb and flow between information and then action.
Right. Which I really, really enjoyed. And I actually really enjoyed that it was super funny, too. There wasn't a lot of
I think Kevin is the more funnier one.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's because he's so young, but he's just that when they were getting attacked by leeches with the cab driver.
Yeah.
And the cab driver's like, get in, what did you think you would do? What else would you have done different? And he's like, I don't know, be gone. Yeah. And he's like, whatever.
I don't know if it's because Kevin is just naturally funny or if because he's immature maybe.
Yeah, just maybe.
But I also think that it's a good way to connect with the audience because we're also having these thoughts.
Yeah, because like you said, it's super intense stuff that the author is covering. And then Kevin's just there like a teenager shrugging his shoulders okay, cool, man.
He can't
what?
Really believe it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's like, are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm the savior of humanity.
Right.
You know my name's Kevin, right? Oh, and then we also get to find out that this happens multiple times. They said that time starts over and over again. So Kevin has this choice later on where he could decide to just go back to his regular life or continue on the savior path. And they also told him that if you go back to your regular life and forget everything, it might happen again. You might end up in this exact same spot. There's these really high-level ideas in there, and I just had to stop for a moment and take in the implications of what's being said. You know what I mean? Because it has far-reaching impact way beyond humanity and Earth. They talk about aliens and the entire universe, really, and how there's a dragon ready to come and consume it all. Yes, that's right. There's a dragon. There's a Jesus figure. There's aliens. There's technology. There's multiple timelines, and there is an intergalactic dragon that just devours planets.
I know. I wasn't sure if they meant a real dragon, fire-breathing dragon, or if it was just some sort of crazy technological alien thing out there floating.
And that's what I think I like too, because at first when they mentioned the dragon, I thought it was a metaphorical type dragon, right? They were just saying the dragon, and it was going to end up being, like you said, some technology or something. But no, it ends up being maybe not a literal dragon, but definitely a monster that eats planets. Yeah. It's insane. This book is insane.
Yeah. I loved how descriptive it was, though. All the gory scenes, heads rolling, and I love that.
It was very gory. And you know what I think this could be is a graphic novel.
For sure, because that's exactly what I was picturing.
This can definitely be a comic book with all of the vivid imagery that he paints. Yeah. With his, he paints really good word pictures.
Yes.
I think you could call it, right?
Yeah.
So this could easily translate into a comic book or something like the Spawn series of comic books. Very dark and gritty.
Yeah.
Oh man, the descriptions of the aliens eating body
God.
parts
Yes.
and just the way he describes them, it's just like ugh, like disgusting and icky.
Yes.
And I could picture them so well. And those pictures that the author put into my mind were disgusting.
Yeah. Lots of goo. Lots of goo. I mean, even when he described how things smell and stuff, like I felt like I was there. I felt bones cracking and like just ickiness everywhere. I really did. It was great.
And this story did a very good job of keeping my attention because we go back and forth between different characters, right? I think Robert and Kevin are the main characters. Yeah. But there's other smaller characters and sub-storylines as well.
And then Wildfire, I was like, she reminds me of like a Harley Quinn or something. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I really liked it, actually, the very beginning. I was super into it. Because it had like that going on with the Matrix stuff. So I was like, oh, okay. It's kind of cool.
I liked Night Stalker and I liked Wildfire, and how they were introduced in the book to really draws you in. And them alone, again, could very well be a graphic novel.
Yeah, and you get, I mean, the story starts and you're right into it. Like
there's no preamble.
There's no lead up to it.
Right,
yeah, you're just and you're like, who is this chick? She's psychotic, but she's so cool and funny, and like she laughs at like all these creatures dying and exploding, and
I wasn't really sure like if she was like maybe just jaded by all of it, right? Maybe she's seen so much of it, or maybe she likes it. So I'm not really sure which one of the two it is, but she ends up being a very interesting character.
Yeah, and I'm sad that there wasn't too much of her, but I'm assuming in the second there will be more of her because she shows up at the end.
So is it at the end, or there is a preview of the next book at the end of this book that I read, and we again go back to Night Stalker and Wildfire, which I was excited about, and the second book sounds just as interesting as the first, and we get to explore this storyline and those characters more.
Yeah, so definitely the first book was like a build-up of the background stories of the characters, like even Darren.
Yeah.
Because you get some of her, but you don't really get to see too much.
And then, so we get to the end, and I'm like, wait, this was just giving us the backstory?
Yeah!
Wow!
428 pages of backstory.
Yeah, so I can tell that this is going to be a very complex world building type of book. Like the author is building worlds here with this series that gets really in depth, has some fantastic high level ideas about humanity, about free will, consciousness, the battle between light and dark. It has some really original ideas that I really enjoyed.
I was just gonna say, I feel like he pulls from a lot of things and makes it his own, but intertwines it and it all makes sense.
Yeah, right? And I like Kevin's response to most of this because he's kind of like incredulous almost. Like, what? Are you sure? Let me read you this quote to show you what I'm talking about here.
So funny. I kept thinking that too, like myself. I was like, no, it can't be him. It's just not him. There's no way.
Kevin took a deep breath. So, I guess I'll summarize. Everything has always existed, and the makeup of all existence is light and darkness. The light wants continuance, and the darkness wants oblivion. Before things exist physically, they exist spiritually. And at that time, everyone agreed, including myself, that I would be the savior and make sure that the darkness doesn't win. We all watched how everything will happen. So to have free will, the memories where we made all of these choices from this spiritual existence was wiped from my mind. That about right? Like, I like how he closes it. That about right? Question mark. Is that what you're trying to tell me here? And again, it reminds me of that scene with like Morpheus and Neo, where Morpheus is explaining how everything he knows is an illusion.
Right.
Yeah. And you're just getting to realize, Neo and the viewers are getting to realize what really is behind the curtain, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in this book, when Robert pulls back the curtain as the Wizard of Oz, what's behind the curtain is hideous. It is a monstrosity back there. Oh God, close the curtain. I want to go back. I don't want to be the savior.
And so he changes his mind, right? But he doesn't really, because he's done this tons of times.
Yeah. Again, talking about how this can be a graphic novel. The ending scene, or the ending battle, let's call it, where Kevin is like supercharged and he's using his abilities to fight back. That was an intense fight scene.
Yeah.
And very well described. Man, I really soaked in those few pages because
few pages, that was like 30 pages.
yeah, those 30 pages or
That was like 30 pages.
I think the ending chapters I really soaked in because again, just really great painting with words, like making these vivid imageries. It's fantastic.
My favorite part of the entire story
was that final battle.
Yeah, because it was like I felt like I was there and I was just, I don't know, it was really good. Played out really well. I don't know. I really liked it when the cop was hiding and then he just saw like one of his other cop dudes like head just roll by him and stuff. Oh man, and like he heard shit coming to him like the monster.
Here's a small quote from the book I'm gonna read that'll give you a good understanding, I think, of the author's descriptive prowess. Robert heard something behind him crawling up the side of the building. Skinless humans wrapped in churning barbed wire were breaking out of the flesh of the walls. Covered in blood, the tortured souls were missing eyes, and the hooks of the wires were constantly grinding into their muscles and organs.
Like, if that doesn't give you nightmares, oh my god. That was intense.
It's a good example of the type of descriptions we get throughout this. And again, I relate it to the Spawn comic books because that's the same kind of like gritty, dark descriptions that you can imagine would be in this book.
So scary. No joke. I had the weirdest dreams like this past week reading it. It was so intense. It was so good.
This book gave you nightmares? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, basically, I had some weird dreams with some weird creatures and, like, just didn't make sense. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, this is a fantastic, epic science fiction story. And I say epic just because of the scale of what's being talked about in this book. You are going to be in for one crazy demented ride.
Demented, yes.
And I say that in a positive way. Like, I have not read a book like this before. It is intense and creepy and well described.
Yeah, and as a writer, too, it's something to kind of admire because it's extremely difficult to write in such a way that's so descriptive, but not too descriptive. You know, sometimes people can go overboard, but man.
You know what this book kind of reminds me of, too? That old Jennifer Lopez movie called The Cell, where she's like a psychologist and she goes into the mind of a serial killer.
Yes.
And the serial killer builds like this whole world because it's his own mind, kind of like Inception. And everything in there is like super creepy and weird.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of how this is. So if you've ever seen that movie and you want more of that creepiness, read this book.
And no J-Lo.
Oh yeah, but no Jennifer Lopez. Which I think is a good thing, right? There's no like sexy female character that is distracting the male protagonist.
Right.
The story is focused on the savior role.
Yeah, of course. But I feel like Wildfire, like she probably has that, but it's not about that at all. So, which is nice.
Which is really nice.
Yeah.
Because a lot of books nowadays have to have some kind of a romance story.
Well, I think that Darren and him, I think there is something kind of mentioned about it, but it's not about that
it's
at
not
all,
huge.
which is nice.
Yeah, it's a very, again, minor kind of storyline.
Right? I feel like I have so many questions after reading it. I'm like, first of all, let me just make a list of all the words that I don't understand.
So you're telling me...
All the track stations are ready.